放一下 slide show，就是把它放到全屏。放到全屏一下 ，OK， 好，那我开始放人了，好吗？
好的，好的，我来录一下。
放一下 slide show，就是把它放到全屏。
Hey Anna, can you hear me?
Yeah，
OK，
放到全屏一下，OK，好，那我开始放人了，好吗？
好的，好的，我来录一下。
放一下 slide show，就是把它放到。
OK, let's wait 1 more minute. OK, let's start. Hey everyone, welcome XCamp number 78th Education Forum. Today's topic is my journey in writing. We're happy to have Amanda Chen to be here to share his experience of writing, especially how he finds her identity. Yeah, this is Chen Guo. I'm the Charlie Guo. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of XCamp. First, I will give you a quick introduction about XCamp. Then we will have our panel discussion. Then we have a Q&A sessions. Finally, we will have an open house. Let me play a 2-minute video about XCamp.
Computer science and artificial intelligence are tools that will change the future. XCamp Academy is a community dedicated to inspiring and cultivating the next generation of computer science and artificial intelligence talent. XCamp Academy was founded in August 2017 in Silicon Valley by 2 Google software engineers. The name XCamp was inspired by the variable X, which represents unlimited opportunities. XCamp's curriculum system and training methodology is inherited from Mr. Xianyou Xu, a Chinese diamond-level international gold medal coach. Our staff here in the US is mostly composed of senior software engineers from tech companies in Silicon Valley and prestigious computer science students from top universities. In addition, we have strong support from international and domestic competition winners in our coach team. From beginner-level Python to classic C++ courses and competition honors courses, XCamp's curriculum is designed for students of all different levels. By participating in team-based competitions and facilitating frequent group study sessions, XCamp also fosters an environment of collaboration to build each student's confidence in their ability to code. As of mid-2023, more than 200 XCamp students have reached USCO Silver Division and above, including 30 in the Platinum Division and 12 were selected in the US camp, out of which 7 were fresh from the 2023 season and 1 is selected for the US national team. In 2022 and 2023, in Stanford's and UC Berkeley's renowned high school programming competition Proco and Calico, X-Camp students won first and second place in the advanced division. In other well-known Bay Area programming competitions, such as the Hardcore Programming Invitational and Teams Code, X-Camp students have won both novice and advanced groups top places and completed the transition from participants to problem writers. Here at X-Camp, we believe that children have unlimited potential and can change the world through coding.
Thank you. Here's about Amanda. She graduated from Dartmouth with nearly 4.0 GPA. Also, she won 18 regional awards and 2 national awards for the writing. Also, she started her own education company in the sophomore year. Hey, Amanda, how about give us more details about your background?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me today, and thank you for everyone for joining this call. So like Charlie said, I recently in 2023 graduated from Dartmouth College with a major in philosophy, a minor in Middle Eastern studies, so I can speak a little bit of Arabic, and a minor in English, or more specifically, creative writing. In high school, I won a bunch of creative writing competitions. I was always really interested in writing. So sorry, Dad. Not exactly your traditional CS STEM kid. I just kind of always gravitated towards what I like to do. In high school, I did debate, orchestra, all the normal stuff. And I started teaching in winter 2021 during COVID because everyone was at home, and it was just a great way to connect with community and students. In terms of my admissions experience, I've got students into Yale, Harvard, Columbia, UT Austin, Carnegie Mellon University, among many others. I've been a college admissions editor. I like to call myself an editor, not. I've been doing that for 4 years now. And in college, I was in Sexual Assault Peer Alliance, my sorority, Kappa Delta Epsilon, the Inter Sorority Council, and I've done various internships in the New Hampshire Supreme Court, the U.S. Attorney's Office, Southern District of New York, along with, so I, not the traditional route, but I found my own.
Hello. Hello. Thank you, Amanda. I invite Amanda to this week's education forum. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I invite you here. One of the major reasons is nearly all XCAM students, we are STEM students. We are good at math, at coding, but some of us, I feel we need a writing too. Writing skill, especially, critical thinking, express your idea. I think it's very, very important for our future too. So yeah, that's the reason I invite you here. Let's see your experiences and how we learn from that. I have several questions. The first one, how did you fall in love with writing?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I actually get asked this a lot from a lot of parents who, like, similar to you, are more like STEM based. So I fell in love with writing because I think I've always been a daydreamer. So I would always like be the kid that had like Beanie Babies and would like make up scenarios around them. So I was always just in my head. And then some like personal stuff happened that was like slightly traumatic in middle school. And I used writing as a way to escape. So I first started reading a ton. I used to read like in 5th grade summer. I got really into like the young adult books. So they're like terrible books if anyone's ever read them, but I enjoyed them. And I read like 8 books a day. Just constantly going to like the library with like a little like with like, the shopping carts that grandmas would take to like the wet market. This was when I lived in Singapore. And I was just constantly reading. And then after a while, I read everything in that library. So I moved on to all the young adult book, not all the books in the library, but just that section of books, which is what I was interested at the time. And I moved to a different library. And once I finished that set of books, I was like, well, if I've read this much, I kind of know what the plot lines are. So why don't I just do it myself? And so I've kind of fell in love with writing as like an escape, just as reading was an escape for me. And then so like the next summer, I spent all summer writing. I wrote 3 books. They're not good. It's not good writing. Sometimes I'll show it to my students and they'll laugh at me, and it's like I think very fun. But I didn't start off as a great writer. I liked writing and I liked the idea. One of my favorite authors, Poir, he writes a lot of queer theory, wrote that like to write is a way to confront the self through flight. So it's a way to confront oneself and to see who oneself truly is through indirect confrontations. And I really like that quote, which is what I think writing eventually became to me. But writing still has a very special place in my heart because I was that classic Asian kid. I did everything competitively. But writing I truly did for myself. And then I just wrote so much that there was this thing called Scholastic Arts and Writing Competition. And my teachers were like, why don't you submit? And I was like, I have the stories here. Why don't I submit? And then I started winning awards. So that's kind of, it never was out of a place of competition. It was never like, I want to win this thing. It was more just like, I did it for myself. And since I had it already, and then the feedback was good. So writing has always been a safe place for me. It's a place for me to express my emotion. And it's a really nostalgic place because it's the first place that I really felt like I had the space and room to really show who I am.
Wow. I think it's a mood. I mean, to see you like read kind of old books in that session in one library and find a second one and 8 books a day. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I can see, especially in the elementary school. I think you were in the 5th grade. Also, my daughter when she was in 3rd grade and 4th grade, like one summer she kind of read not that many, but she counted 72 books in that summer. Also, like Harry Potter, she read 7 times, whole 7 books. So I feel in the elementary school, if we can help kids to go to library, read, it will be very, very important, for them to like reading and then writing. Yeah, glad to hear your story. For the next question, I like to know, how did reading and writing help you? And in other words, what's the value of the reading and writing?
Yeah, so that's another really good question that I get a lot. So obviously the easiest way to respond to this is that English was super easy for me in high school and middle school. My teachers would constantly just hand me back a blank rubric, which basically meant I got 100. So even like the notoriously hard, the English teachers that like will only give you a 90 or 97, and then all the kids are freaking out because now their perfect GPAs are affected. I never got anything lower than 100. And when they said I had to follow the structure, I'd be like, no, I can do it better. Here's my structure. And there was just like an understanding that to just let me do what I'm doing, because what I did was better quality than what like the standard like 5-paragraph essay was, which is something I really try to encourage with my students. And so I guess like on a deeper level, I think it's like kind of relating back to how I answered question 1, where I think for me, it was really just a place to really just use my voice how I saw fit. And I didn't show my writing to anyone else. God, I like can't even think about showing that writing to my parents. It was just a really, really private space for me to explore and express myself through fantasy, through fiction, through dystopians, through whatever genre that I was interested in the moment. And then I guess third, it really helped me get to know myself, kind of like an offshoot of the second point. It really helped me get to know like my strengths, like the darker parts of me that most people don't like confronting. It was really like a form of like therapy, in a way. And it obviously then, because I had a strong sense of self, it made it really easy to answer the college application questions, which are really deep questions like, tell me a moment where you struggled and gained a new understanding of yourself. I once showed my dad my application questions and he was like, I don't know how to answer this. And I was like, this is why it's hard. This is why college applications are hard, because if you don't know yourself And if you don't know why you want to study CS or bioengineering or whatever, you can't write these essays, because a good answer will never be, my mom told me to do it. That's just not going to sell to the college admissions officers. It's also made me a better speaker because I understand myself, and that helps me have more compassion for others as well. I've spoken at multiple conferences. I've spoken at the UCA conference, or sorry, the Chinese School Conference. It's made me really passionate about activism as I've gotten to know myself. And I've really started to love just communicating with people, learning their stories. And I think it's just the benefits are like numerous, but I think most importantly, it was that strong sense of self and identity, and that served me to this day. For example, I got offered a job at the UCA because they didn't offer internships before me. And I spoke at the conference and connected with some of the employees, and the president created an internship specifically for me. So I think it's a lot more, you might not see the impacts directly immediately the way you would see it in like a STEM competition or like math skills. But I think overall for the development of the student, it makes a huge difference.
Great. That's great to know, especially writing, helps you to know yourself better. I like say, know ourselves is the number one challenging maybe throughout our whole life. Yeah, I'm glad, writing is one way, especially even from we are young, we can write and help us to know ourselves, to understand ourselves. Yeah, that's great. Also, I can see, during this kind of period, you can be independent, when you know yourself, so you know what you want, you might not be a CS kid, so you can say no to your dad. I also say this is also very important, for the parents and the students here. We are here to help our kids to be independent thinker, to be independent, to know themselves, to know their own needs, to know their own heart. Yeah, thank you for sharing this. Let me go to the third question. Yeah, did your parents support you writing? How were their rules?
Yeah, so I guess because it started off as like kind of like a like separate space for me to explore myself, and it was like like the joke of like, oh, the Asian kid rebels, they just practice 5 minutes less of 2 hours of piano. That was like a similar thing where like writing was my sense of rebellion, because I could like, if I was really mad at my dad, and like if there are students here, when you're really mad at your parents. It happens to all of us. I would write him as a character and I would kill him off in my novel. And so it was a way for me to just truly feel my emotions, and it was a place for me like to just let it loose. And I think this isn't common in my family, but also a lot of the Asian culture. It's like means is really important. So I couldn't express that emotion outwardly. Like when I cried, my grandfather would be like, "Don't cry, that's weak, stop it." So I wasn't allowed to express my emotions directly. So I guess in a sense, my parents supported my writing. I don't think they ever understood it. They certainly started supporting it more when I was winning competitions, but they supported me in the only way they knew how to, which was financially. So all the entries that I submitted a ton, my dad paid for. There was not a question of that. So I think they supported me in the way that they could. I don't expect my parents, who are STEM people, to understand why writing means so much to me. We just come from two different worlds. So in a sense, I think I was supported to the best of their ability, but I do wish that there was more emotional support, which is, I think, something that I try to stress to the parents of my students, because I don't want my students to go through the same things I went through. But I think the number one thing I want to tell parents, if I can stress anything, is that sometimes your kid might have different interests. And I know you want safety for them, because I know the whole immigration process to America with the H-1B visas, you want to create that safety net for your kids. But sometimes you have to learn to trust that your kid knows what they're doing and to make their own mistakes. For example, I could be fine at CS. I was decent at math. My dad always said I sucked, but I was 2 grade levels ahead, so I wasn't terrible. I could have been okay at CS. I don't think I would have been as successful as I am in liberal arts, for example. Because I may not be at Google, I may not be at Twitter or X, now that it's called that, but I found my own path. I'm going to go to law school. I'm running this company now. I built something that really meant a lot to me. And so the thing I want to stress is that you could be limiting your kid by placing what worked for you onto them, because every student, every person is different. I don't teach each student the same way. And so I might not be your traditional idea of a successful student, but I think I'm successful because I created something of value. I'm teaching, I really enjoy it. I'm going to end up working at a law firm one day, but I'm genuinely very happy with where I'm at. Could I be making billions of dollars at Google or some big tech company? Maybe, but I don't think I'd be as happy and as passionate as the work I'm doing now.
Wow. Yes, thanks for sharing. I'm a parent too. I'm a dad too. I have 2 kids. I also got touched what you shared, especially respect kids' emotion. I think that's very important. For me, from Asian background, sometimes I say, why you're crying? Why you are sad? I think that's a very silly question. Now I realize, emotion is emotion. We need to respect kids' emotion. Also, I agree with you, as the first generation, we faced, challenges. So sometimes we don't have enough, confidence to our kids. Now I feel we shall be more confident. Our kids, like, be yourself. Definitely you will have a very good life. We shall not worry about that. Thank you for your share. This part, yeah. Also, I'm a friend of your parents. Thank you. I think that's important. Also, I know your parents support you very well. But sometimes, yeah, as Asian parents, we might need to learn better of our kids. Thank you. And next question, college application is very important. College definitely is one kind of a journey in our life. So as a good writer, how did you write your college applications?
Yeah, so I would say this is like a question that I like as a college counselor. I get this a lot. I think college essays are unlike anything I've ever written, and I've done creative writing just because the prompt format and like there's just a lot of things to consider, and also it just feels so much like the college application process feels so much bigger as like a student, because it's like, oh, I've been hearing about these kids getting to all these Ivies. If I don't get into it, I'm going to fail. I'm not going to be successful. That's at least what I was thinking. So there's a lot more pressure when it came to the application process, I guess. And it's similar to the creative competition writing, but it's different because it's so big in kids' heads, especially if you're a high school senior. It's terrifying, especially if your parents have never had to apply to an undergrad school in the US. It's terrifying. So I'd say psychologically, it's unlike anything I've ever done. It's also asking you really hard questions that I really don't think anyone has any business asking 18-year-olds. Like asking an 18-year-old, like, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? They're 18. I don't know if they know. I didn't know at 18. So I think that's where the pressure really comes from. I ended up hiring a college counselor to help me with the application. I realized pretty soon, though, the college counselor wasn't really helpful for me, because he just sat there and he was like, okay, fill out this Common App. And he'd be like, okay, put when your parents were born, put where they went to, like, students don't need someone to handhold them through filling out a form. What was really helpful with working with that editor was that he hired a essay editor who was an actual writer who had novels published. And she changed the way that I approached writing college admissions essays, because it's a very different form of writing from short stories, from poems, and definitely from persuasive essays that you do in school. So I think I really gained a lot from that essay editor. If he did not hire that essay editor, I probably would not have gotten to the schools I got into, to be honest, because she was crucial in helping me form my story. And then I think another crucial thing that I had to realize in the application process was that I had to stop gaming it. When I started thinking of like, oh, I don't know how to do X. What does this college want? What does a Harvard student look like? What does a Yale student look like? When I started thinking like that, I got overwhelmed and I was writing for somebody else. I think the main lesson that I try to teach all my students when I talk about college essays is that you have to write for yourself, because otherwise you are not writing true to yourself. So I think that was a really important realization that I had to have. was I had to just treat it like I treated my competitions, where I wasn't gaming it. I wasn't thinking about how to fit this school. No, I'm going to write who I am, and if they don't want me, I don't want to go there because I probably don't fit the school. And I think that's like the main realization that I had when I was applying to colleges. But it's definitely really tough. And most of the time I'm working with students, and when I was in the process myself, it was a lot of like mental blocks. It was a lot of fear. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, great. Yeah, thank you. I think write who you are, to be the true of yourself. That's very important. To find the matched college. Also, I heard for your college admission officer, when I think he noticed you know your name, he said, okay, he still remember your essay. It's amazing one. Yeah.
Yeah, that actually is a really funny story. So when I applied to Dartmouth and I got in, the admissions officer hand wrote me a letter. And it was handwritten because I like smudged the ink and it smudged. But she basically said, like, I remember you, like, I loved your essays this year, with some of the strongest I've seen. And then she was like, I can see from your essays that you're a leader, that you're compassionate. And she was naming all these traits that I didn't even think I had. So I think the reason I got into the school that I got into was because of my essays. And you don't often get confirmation like that, but if an admissions officer says you're writing with some of the strongest I've seen this year, pretty sure that's why I got in. And actually so there's like admitted students day. So my dad and I went to Dartmouth Dimensions is what it's called. And I went in, and this lady who I'd never seen before was like, oh my God, because I like was checking in. I was like, I'm Amanda Chen. She was like, oh my God, Amanda. I was like, I don't know you, lady. And it was the admissions officer who hand wrote that letter to me. And she like as soon as she heard my name, she was like, I said Amanda. She was like, Amanda Chen. She got really excited. And I was sitting here looking at this woman who I didn't know. And I was like, she knows too much about me because I bared my soul in my writing. So I like to joke around with my students frequently. I'm like, if you're not embarrassed to meet the people who are reading your essays, you're not doing it right. That's just kind of a joke amongst my students and I. But yeah, I think it's a very, very fun story to share.
Oh yeah, that's kind of big support. Yeah, how your essay is great. Also, I think that's might have the impact for you to start your own, pen and paper education company, right? Okay, great. Thank you. Let's go to next question. Yes, I want to learn more about your, extracurricular activities in high school. I think that experience might, give learnings for the parents and students here.
Yeah, so I did the main activity I did was I was captain of the Westlake speech and debate team. I did specifically Lincoln Douglas debate. I gained a lot of value out of that. It influenced a lot of my writing because I had to read a bunch of philosophy. That's why I ended up being a philosophy major. And I really developed critical thinking skills off of that. I was also in orchestra. I played the viola. I was in HOSA, Health Occupation Students of America, I think is what the full thing is. I did biomedical debate and community emergency response team from there. I did community emergency response team, which was like coordinating logistics in case an emergency happened at like the huge Westlake football games. I was in student council, obviously participated in writing competitions. I was VP of the Slam Poetry Club, and I played piano competitively. I also interned at a law firm, a local family law / criminal law firm in Austin that was across the street from the local county courthouse. So I kind of just dabbled in everything. I just kind of went with what I was interested. My dad tried to get me to do math Olympiads. That did not last very long. I would just stage mass protests. I'd be like, I'm not doing that. I'd rather spend my time doing this. And regardless of whatever he thought would be more safe, I think I turned out pretty well. And it was actually that law firm, that internship that really confirmed to me that I actually really liked law. And I was doing all the stuff that people didn't want to do. I was editing NDAs. I was getting coffee. I was filing paperwork. And it just wasn't all that exciting looking back on it, but I was 16. you're not going to trust a 16-year-old with really serious stuff. But even that little bit of work experience, I think, really helped that initial interest into law. Because for the longest time, I was like, I want to be an author. And my parents were like, that's not practical, which granted, it's not very practical. So I think it's important to incorporate advice from parents because they do know some things. But I think it's a balancing act because if you go too much in one direction, too restrictive, like, oh, my parents say I've got to do CS, I've got to do math Olympiads, I've got to do Quiz Bowl, you might end up not recognizing yourself and you might end up being really unhappy in college because all you've been doing up until this point is living according to what someone else has told you to do. So I think it's important to really have that strong sense of self because even when my dad's putting pressure on me, I can be like, no, I don't want to do econ. And just sticking to that, who you want and who you want to be, because ultimately it's your life. So that's kind of the approach that I found in high school.
Wow, great. Yeah, I think through so many extracurricular activities, you not even know better. You like writing, right? You like teach kids writing too. Yeah, also I kind of also agree with you. We need to find ourselves. Sometimes parents, help us, but sometimes parents may push us too hard. Let's find the balance. That's great. That's great to hear. Next question. Yeah, in college, how did you continue developing your passions?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. So I think my approach in college was I knew certain things that I really liked. Like I knew I wanted to do philosophy. I knew I was obsessed with philosophy because of the debate. So I continued that passion into it. Just I like reading esoteric stuff. I think it's a fun puzzle to figure out what this person actually means. I've read a bunch of different philosophers, to be honest, and I could talk for hours on it. You don't want me doing that though. Yeah, so I knew I liked law, so I joined clubs like the Law Journal. I joined clubs and I had internships at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York. I was in the Terrorism and International Narcotics Unit. I also interned at the New Hampshire Supreme Court with Associate Justice James Bassett. I actually so the fight with my dad continued into college. He was like, I want you to be an econ major. I think his exact words were, well, at least pick the major with the easiest math. I didn't stick with it because I didn't like it. So I ended up but he wanted a safety net for me, but I was like, law is my safety net, so I don't need a safety net for my other safety net. That's just overkill. And so I knew I was passionate about advocacy from debate as well because I liked arguing for causes. So I also was at my sorority, I was the diversity and inclusivity chair. I was diversity and inclusivity in the inner sorority council. I also helped manage Rush and like diversity programs for that. I was in Women in Business. I was in Dartmouth Asian organization. So I kind of followed that advocacy route as well. But I also still left the door open for other things because I wanted to still explore. And because I think I went to the school that I went to, I really wanted to explore all the opportunities they had. So I also explored investment banking. I interned at a small investment banking firm, Tuck Advisors. So I left the door more open. I joined Dartmouth Investment Philanthropy Program. It's like investments and you've got to defend your portfolio. It was an interesting experience. Decided I don't want to go that direction, obviously, because I'm here. But I wouldn't have known that I didn't like it if I didn't actually do it. And I also left the door open. I went in wanting to take Spanish. Didn't like Spanish, ended up taking Arabic. So now I speak Arabic as well. And I also opened myself up to like joining a sorority, which I never thought I would do. So I think I left the door open because I think only when you're uncomfortable do you really grow as a person. And I thought it was really important to constantly challenge myself like that because I have certain things that I want to do and that are goals. And I have great advice from my parents, but ultimately I make my own choices. And once I try something and I don't like it, now I know, cool. I don't have to waste 10 years doing an MBA. I can just go to law school, do what I actually want to do.
Wow, great. I like what you just especially said. you make your own decisions. I think that's very important. Also, only after you try, you know you don't like it. I can see you try a lot of things, yeah, proactively. That's very good. That's a very good, to know yourself too. Yeah, great. Yeah, next one, I think that's also very important. That's also one of my interests too, especially some ex-camp kids, they need, I think they need better writing skills. So the question is, how did you start your company started teaching kids, or maybe you started teaching kids definitely before your company, how you help them write essays?
Yeah, so I started teaching in my sophomore fall of college, so around I think September 2020. That was when I did my first internship in law, U.S. Attorney's Office, Southern District of New York, in the Terrorism and International Narcotics Unit. I think I liked the job a lot, but they didn't pay you because it was the government, and the government doesn't pay you much often. So I needed a way to cover rent in New York because New York in COVID was still expensive, less expensive, but very expensive. So I had to pay for rent somehow. And I interviewed at several boba shops actually, but the hours didn't work out. So I got a college essay editing gig at a small company. Ended up working them for that cycle, and then I also worked for another company. And I enjoyed the experience because it like first started as a practical way to make money. I'm not going to lie to you, but I fell in love with it because I got to really know my students. Because I was a late newcomer, I got all like the problem students, I guess, is what they called it. And it was just kids that were really hard to work with and hard to like communicate with. I got all those cases. And through that, I really, really got to know how to work with students. So I would go to work from like 9 to 6, and then from 6 to 2 a.m. I'd be tutoring. And I would stay for hours on the phone with these kids because I got genuinely invested in helping them get to the school they wanted to. And through the process, I really got to know them, and people kept coming up to me being like, how did you get this kid to write the essay? And I'm like, because I know them. Like I can tell you all about all these students. And that takes time, and that's a process. But I really started falling in love with teaching people how to write because as cool as it is to write myself and to submit to competitions, there's less of a community around that. And so I think that's what I ended up falling in love with. I also, and then eventually, I started repeating myself so often to the students that I was like, I could just teach a course off of this. And then I started developing slides. I taught 2 courses the next term, so winter 2021, in partnership with a local Chinese Sunday school. And then from there, it kind of blew up. So the next term, I had like 90 students across 4 classes. And then I started adding more and more classes, all the while still working one-on-one with people, and helping people win writing competitions, helping people get into the colleges of their dreams. And I kind of really, that's where I kind of started teaching people, and I've kind of stuck with it because it's just, I mostly work with STEM students because those are the people that tend to seek me out. So I'm really good at explaining to STEM kids in terms they understand how to write. And I think it's such a gift to work with people who don't think they can write. So kind of an answer to that second question, how do I help kids write essays? I'd say that I can think of 2 great examples. So the first example is a girl who ended up getting into CMU, and her stats and her resume, I didn't think that there was a chance, but she was like, this is my dream school. And I was like, okay, then we apply. She was a hard case because she was really insecure. She didn't believe that she could get into like UT even, but I was like, you're auto admit to UT. You're getting into UT. It might not be the program you want, but that's what auto admit means. So she was really insecure about herself. And I think the biggest lesson I took from her is that you have to really get to know the student. You have to get to know kind of like the mental blocks they have, because oftentimes students are told by parents, you can't write. You're not good at writing. You can only do STEM. In the similar way that my dad told me I couldn't do math. And that limiting belief, however, it might have come from a good place, I have to help work the student through that. That's honestly the biggest challenge that I found, are these like mental blocks my kids have. So I ended up really getting to know her and knowing when to back off, when to put the pressure on, and when to pull back. And so she was a huge lesson. It was really rewarding because I remember she, at our last session, was like, no one has ever told me that I can write. And that was a really powerful moment because I was like, what would have it been like if I was her age and someone actually believed that I could do math? Maybe I would have actually become a CS person. I don't know, right? But I think too many kids are being told that because they're good at STEM, they can't write. But I don't think that's true. And then another example I can think of is a student of mine who ended up going to UT, the Turing's CS program, the honors program, which is getting really competitive now. And he was incredibly arrogant. He told me in our first call, he was like, I think I'm guaranteed to get into at least 6 of the Ivies. And that made me take a step back because I was like, whoa, I don't know how to handle you. But I kept working with him and we had some really tense sessions, but eventually I found a way to speak to him and to kind of like see past that kind of like barrier he put up and to help him learn how to open up emotionally because he grew up in a similar household to me where he was allowed to express that emotion. So it was just about getting him to trust that this was a safe space. So I think kind of like to summarize it, I think how I help students depends on the student. And I think that's a philosophy that differentiates the service that I offered and why I ended up I started my own company. I wasn't working for other companies anymore because I just didn't feel they had that personal touch. At the other companies I worked for, it was always like, try to get the kid to book one more session. And I'd be like, the essay is good. And they'd be like, you need to get them to book one more session. And I didn't like that. So I think that's my main lesson as like a writing tutor is like each student is different. Every kid writes differently. And so I have to get to know the kid. And I like that one-on-one. And I don't think I didn't get that at a bigger company. And I also didn't feel like I could do that at a tutor at another company.
Wow, yeah, yeah. Getting to know the students, this is very, very powerful. Also, I think you help them to know themselves better so they can write the essay about the real person. Yes. Okay, yeah, that's great. I think that's kind of the power of your teaching too. So next one is yeah, what class do you provide and what services do you have?
Yeah, so I'm starting up classes again. I kind of took a little bit of a break because I was graduating and things got really busy on my end. So I'm offering College 001, which is my intro to it's my intro to the Common App, so the personal statement. It's answering like it's how to answer those like 8 prompts I give you on the Common App. It also helps with Applied Texas. We'll talk more about that in the open house. So if you are interested in this, stay until the end because I can answer questions. I have slides at the end that are specific to the classes I offer. So that's the first class. Those are mostly college seniors. Not college seniors, sorry, high school seniors, as well as high school juniors and sophomores or anyone who wants to get ahead. It's also a great course. I allow certain creative writing inclined middle schoolers to join because it helps with memoir writing as well, which is a classification of the Scholastic Arts and Writing. I also provide, so I've hired someone because I can't manage it all on my own. She's a brilliant writer. I'll talk more about her later. To teach persuasive writing. This is a class that's a ton of my students in the past have taken and have really enjoyed, and now we're revamping the curriculum to make more exercises and more interactions. And it's helping students learn how to write persuasive essays. I did debate in high school, so all my curriculum is based off of actual experiences and actually working with students. And my teacher taught us a speech writing class, so she's very, very familiar with that area of writing. And then also in terms of other services, I offer a bunch of one-on-one stuff. You'll have to email me. You can see on the bottom right. That's my email. Email me if you want services. I've helped students win multiple writing competitions. I've helped students apply to colleges. I've helped students apply to summer camps. I've helped students apply to private middle schools and high schools. I've done a wide variety. I've also done one-on-one like school help. So if you want more of an individualized attention, definitely email me. So I offer a variety of services, but for this summer, I am offering only 2 courses. One aimed more for middle schoolers, also some high schoolers if they really need it. That's the Writing 001, Persuasive Writing. And College 001 is for kind of more some select middle schoolers. We'll have to talk and you'll have to send me some writing samples. And then as well as mostly high school students. And that's just how to write the college essay. So I think that's about it.
Great. Yeah, these are all great classes, yeah, and the services. Yeah, we may discuss more after this session in the open house one. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think this might be the last question. What's your future plans?
Yeah, so I took 2 years off of college. This is about to be my first year after graduating from college. I'm probably going to go to law school. I'm applying this application cycle, so it'll be exciting for my students who are also applying this cycle because I'll be applying with them, which will be fun. And I think I'll be applying to colleges or to law schools, and I'm hoping that I'll matriculate in 2025. So my future plans are to do business law, kind of a similar thing to what I'm doing right now, kind of like advising. I think long term, I want to advise small entrepreneurship, small businesses like mine, navigate legal landscapes. Because I got really overwhelmed with like contracts, with NDAs, with I was talking to someone in Tokyo to work with schools there and applications, but that got really complicated because I didn't know how to navigate international business law because I was a senior in college. So I was like 20. So I didn't know what I was doing at all. So I think right now for this next year, I'm going to be applying. I'm taking the LSAT, and I'm also working on building up this company because truly I'm going to end up being a lawyer, but I've just really loved working with students all throughout college, connecting with people, that I think I would like this business to continuously run even as I get older, because I think there is a hole in the market in the college admissions one, especially. It's a lot of people who aren't writers, who are just trying to get parents to pay like $20,000 for a service that I don't think is really necessary. And how do you teach writing if you yourself don't know how to write? So I think ultimately my goal is to work and help more small businesses, kind of like mine, find their footing. But I don't want to forget kind of where this dream came from, which is working with students. And I think, yeah, so kind of a long-winded answer, but I guess the short answer is I'm going to law school.
Okay, yeah. Great. That's good to know. I think, yeah, you will continue your writing passion. Also, you will find, I think, fun in law school too. Yeah, I think let's go to that's kind of also questions I like to ask you. So let's have our Q&A sessions. I already see several questions asked in the chat. Also, I like ask Anna. She is the event coordinator for this one and put a lot of time and effort for this event. Yeah, I like her to help us for this Q&A session. Hey, Anna.
Hi everyone. Thank you both for your wonderful sharing. Next, we will move into the question and answer session. Everyone can put your question in the chat or send them privately, whatever you like. Amanda can accept English and Chinese, so feel free to ask questions in either language. For those interested in consulting about Amanda's writing courses, we can scan the QR code and the Teacher Chen's WeChat to join the pen to paper education WeChat group. That's okay. So now let's begin the QA session. I have some questions in the chat. What do you think are the biggest difference between the creative writing you did and the college essay writing?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think I touched on it, but I think it's a great question. I think the main difference is that there's a prompt. So you're being prompted and you need to make sure you're answering the prompt. So they say name one experience, don't name two. Because that's the easiest way your application will be disregarded. Because if your answer, that means you can't answer, you can't follow instructions, and that means you probably won't be great at college. So I think there's certain creative liberties that I can take when I'm writing in a creative writing competition because there's unprompted, it's just write whatever. So I can write a short story and have like a poem in the middle of it because I'm experimenting with things. And it would still win. But for college essays, there's like a certain level of how much you can disclose. So I had a student once that wrote about this mental breakdown he had, and he was like, and then I stabbed myself. And I was like, okay, we're not including that. You're going into too much detail about you stabbing yourself. Let's leave that out. So there's certain things that I think, which is why I think it's good to have another set of eyes on it, to just have someone be like, okay, no. I think there's some cursing that can happen in college essays in certain situations, but there's just like, you have to filter it through the college lens. You kind of have to have a happy ending. And I think that's the only difference. It's like with creative writing competitions, you kind of do whatever. Like I've seen some crazy stuff being submitted recently, especially there's more like transformative exploratory content, especially in poetry. But you can't really do that in the college because you need to remember who you're writing for. You're not writing for judges. You're not writing to be the next Ernest Hemingway. You're writing to get into college, which means the goal is different. Writing competitions, you want great writing, great lyrical writing. In college essays, it's more, who are you? If you write flowery, that covers you up. Sorry.
Okay, I have a private message. So this question is, my child's vocabulary isn't very rich when writing essay. How can I help her increase her writing vocabulary?
Yeah, so I've gotten this question a bit, especially for my younger kids. I used to teach third grade to fifth grade writing fundamentals. I don't think I do that anymore. But I got that question a lot from parents. It was also in a similar vein, how do I get my kid to read more books? I think it's kind of like, it's hard to answer it because again, every kid is different. That would be something that would like, I could best answer it if I knew your particular circumstance. But I found with kids, at least when I'm teaching, it's good to incorporate games. So if you can make learning vocabulary like a fun game with rewards, kids tend to like that. So I did Membean, and I'm also just a nerd. So, but I loved doing Membean because it would gamify it. Or like Duolingo. Duolingo sucks for actually learning how to speak a language, but if you're learning letters, and like I'm learning Korean right now, it's great because it like the owl will pop up and it's really exciting. So I think things like that have more of a reward and feel more like fun and less like work tend to work better with especially younger students, but also older students. I also think to get people to read more, I've always encouraged parents, just let your kids read whatever they want to read. If it's obviously within reason, don't go searching out rated R stuff. But like I would always encourage, like I read terrible books. I read books where like there were angels and werewolves and it was it was bad writing. But it got me to read more, and that got me into more classics. And eventually I started expanding. So I always encourage, I think the best way to learn vocabulary is to encourage them to read more. And to read more means at least first encourage them to read stuff they like. And if they don't like there has to be something that someone likes reading. For example, one of my good friends reads a bunch of news articles. I think it's the most boring thing in the world, and I don't do that. He wakes up in the morning and he pulls up the Wall Street Journal and reads that day's like stock exchanges. I don't think that's interesting, but he has a great vocabulary because of that. So I think for each student, whether it's reading about space, dinosaurs, about angels or whatever, find what they're interested in, and slowly the vocabulary will start increasing.
Yeah, the same parents ask another question. This question is, are there any recommended books to improve writing and reading skills?
Well, I guess if I don't know if your kid will like this and read it, but there are things called craft books out there. And so if you go on Amazon, you can, and like I can send out, if you're in the WeChat, I can send out like a list of books that I recommend that are more like, they're very dry. They're hard to read even for me, but there are like essays on like how to use the semicolon in interesting ways in poetry. I find it dry. Your kid might not like it, but there are resources out there if you want to learn as well. There's also a bunch of like books out, like chat books out there about like how do you be like, it's like I've loved the series The Art of Blank. So it's like the art of perspective, the art of style, the art of grammar, the art of, so it's like a series of books. They're not interesting to read. I can promise you they're not interesting to read, but I think that's like the most driest form. But also I think there's, if you go online and look up best young adult books, that's a great way for students to start if they want something easier, more digestible, more fun to read. I think genre fiction's a great thing. So like crime, thriller novels are always a good place to start. Sci-fi, dystopian. The Hunger Games is a great place to start. If you like Harry Potter, there's a whole world like Aragon. There's Lord of the Rings if you want to get more advanced. There's a ton of different genres that you can get into. I find most of my students like starting off with fantasy and sci-fi and then eventually moving into more realistic fiction. But I rarely find that students want to start with nonfiction. So don't start with want you reading 10 articles on The Economist. I don't do that. And I was an econ major once. So I'd say within, I think providing them with a lot of options. I don't know if people do this anymore, but when I was younger, I like lived in the librarians. Like after school, I would just go sit in the library and talk to the librarian. And she recommended a bunch of books. But I think ultimately reading more is just you just need to get them to start. If it's a terrible picture book, just get them to start. So it's kind of a long-winded answer, but there's a ton of different materials out there. It just depends on what your kid is interested in. So if you want, you can email me one-on-one and explain your situation. I can try to give you more like specific recommendations. But I could send a series of just like dry essays on how to write if people want that in the WeChat later.
Yes. 所以说，接下来有一个家长给我们提了一个中文的问题，I can translate for that。他说的是我的孩子写东西很干，就是您刚才说的那个干。他说写的很干巴巴的，想问一下有什么一些办法？His question is, what should I do if my child's writing seems dry?
我觉得如果你孩子写的有点干的话，我有几个 exercises，所以我不知道他让不让你做。可是就是我觉得用一个 letter 的方式，就是比如说你如果想写关于你爷爷的问题，你就开始写 Dear 爷爷，因为这样子会 if it's less formal, the kids tend to open up more. If it sounds, and another way that I do is if your kid is better talking about stories in like just talking, they're good at like telling their friends stories. I often have them record themselves, like speech to text, or just have someone else typing. Sometimes when I have students who are really dry, I'll sit there and type out what they're saying directly, and then we'll look at it and I'll be like, look, this is just how you think. That's how you should write. So I think it's just about breaking down those barriers. I also have exercises. So one is the letter, writing a letter to someone, writing a letter to an object, writing a letter generally helps. If you write directly to a you, tends to break down that dry barrier. This is more for creative writing. I can address the more persuasive writing later. But I also find that I give students an exercise where I just put up a picture and put up a song that matches the picture. And I'm like, okay, write 10 minutes, go. It's just, I think if it's dry, there's something else going on normally. It's not their writing ability. It's the fact that they don't think they can write. And so if that's the type of student, group lessons might not be the best. If these exercises don't work, normally that's the type of student that I would do better working one-on-one with, because there's a lot more blocks that you can't really address in a class because there's just too many people, unless they come to office hours. But that's what I would kind of recommend. There's not a one size fit all for the solution, because it's every kid has their own blocks, has their own limiting beliefs, and working through that is the main challenge. And then for more persuasive writing, That one's hard because persuasive writing, the persuasive writing that school wants is just dry. You kind of just have to write to the audience. But if you want to improve persuasive writings, I would read The New Yorker. They have really great persuasive memoir style stuff. Honestly, I think the best way to improve writing is just to read. When I go through a dry spell, I normally just pull up a bunch of books and I read a ton. And that normally inspires me. You can't learn how to write if you don't read stuff. So long answer, but yeah.
Yes. One question comes from Ella. He asks, how can I improve SAT reading skills? Are there any quick methods?
So I have thoughts on this. I will go against every single one of your SAT, ACT prep people. And I will say, no, there are no quick fixes. If you're smart, which I'm assuming you are, I'm assuming most people in this call are, just read. And I know that's harsh, but I'm doing LSAT study right now. This goes back to my conversation of gaming the system and not gaming the system. When I try to game the reading passage, so I'm like, oh, I read the questions first, then I go read the passage, I do worse. I do so much worse. I once signed up for this LSAT prep company, and they told us to game it. They were like, it's like what you said, quick methods to do it better. That's only going to get you so far, because if you don't understand what's being asked and you don't understand the passage, I don't know how you're going to answer it. It's like going into the supermarket and like you don't know where things are. You don't know what the things that are being sold are. It's like I was in Denmark and I was sick and I was trying to buy medicine and I don't speak Danish. And I was just trying to find some Advil and I couldn't find it. That's kind of the equivalent. So I don't think there is a quick method. When I have worked with students on test prep, I think you can go to test prep companies, but they'll only get you to a certain score. How I improved was this isn't fast or quick. So if you want fast or quick, I don't have it for you because I think hacking it doesn't really work. What worked for me was I would do a bunch of tests and then I would sit down, pull out a separate sheet of paper, and I would write question 2. I got this wrong because blank. And then I would, under every single answer choice, write I wouldn't just look at the right answer choice. I would look at all the answer choices, write down why all the answer choices were wrong. Why they were supposed to be wrong, and why I thought the wrong answer choice I picked was right, and why that's wrong. And I did that for every single question I missed. So it's not fast. My brother didn't want to do it when I told him to do it, but it worked for me. And so I don't think there's a quick way to do it. I think you just have to do a ton of practice tests and really get to know the tests, which sucks. I'm doing that for the LSAT and I hate it. Trust me, I hate every moment of it. I think the best place, especially if you want that minimal, that 1 or 2 points above, I think hiring a private tutor is going to work out best. When I work with students on reading, I'll teach them the way that I read a passage, how I annotate things, what I pick out, how I look at structure, because structure will guide you in going back into the passage. So there are different methods. I think it's better done one-on-one if you want those really, really good score improvements, because a big class, you're just not going to get that help. You're not going to get where you mess up. What I do with my LSAT tutor is we sit down and I pull up my review board with all the work I've done, and he goes through and is like, why did you think this? And I try to explain it. He's like, you're not making sense right now. So it's like I take a very similar approach when I help people with reading comprehension. It's about how to get you to read it in a way that makes sense. I call it caveman reading. Once I was analyzing an argument, for example, and it was about like how smaller species have a less chance of surviving than larger species, and I translated that as big boys have trouble finding food. When weather bad, big boys can't find food. Small boys can find food better. Ergo, small boys easier to survive. So if you break it down and you understand it, that's all you need. So again, a very long-winded answer, but I think if you want to talk more directly, send me an email and we can chat.
OK， 接下来的一个问题是一个中文的问题，我问完之后，然后也帮你翻译一下。就是说，Amanda，你读书更喜欢读哪种类型的书？什么样的阅读你认为对提高你的写作最有效？ what are Amanda's reading preference? Which type of reading do you think would most improve your writing?
So I think, again, might not be a satisfactory answer. There's not a one size fit all. I started reading terrible books, because I liked it, and I liked reading it, and it was easy for me. And they were pretty trashy books, to be honest. But that's what got me interested. So I think as a starter, I always tell parents when I work with a student, I'm like, okay, what type of stuff do you, especially when I work with creative writing students for some reason always think that they don't need to read stuff. And I'm like, how are you going to improve if you don't read stuff? So we talk about what they are interested in. If they say Harry Potter, then I suggest magical fantasy stuff. It's just kind of based on what the student reads. I think in terms of what best helped me improve, honestly, I would say it's philosophy, but again, not many people are going to read philosophy. So don't go putting Descartes on your kids' desk. They're not going to.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So I thought philosophy helped me improve the most. It honestly improved by writing a ton because I took like a year-long break from writing because I got really involved in debate. And I came back and I was writing these really philosophical passages amongst my prose, which if you've read my writing recently, it's like a similar style. So I write more in literary fiction, but I don't think genre writing is bad. I don't think genre poetry is bad. I don't think genre like serialized novels are bad. As long as you're constantly reading something, that's even if it's like gossip blogs, you're reading a little bit, because it slowly adds up. It's not as if you can just sit there one summer and study a ton of classics and suddenly your writing is amazing. It helps, but I think it's more just a love and a constant habit of going back to it that helps most. But I have read a bunch of classics. Honestly, some of them I don't get the hype. Like Virginia Woolf, everyone loves her. I think she writes too flowery, but that's my opinion. So I think there's not a one size fit all, but again, if you have a specific question about what your kid normally tends to read and I can suggest things, I think that might be the most helpful. So again, email me if you have questions.
Yeah. So our Q&A session will conclude here. I see that many parents still have a few questions about Amanda's writing courses. So we will next start a 30-minute open house. All you guys are welcome to stay and continue to ask questions. If you have some other schedules, that's okay. We'll see you in our next event. So let's remain on this Zoom. Let's open the open house. 大家如果说现在有一些其他的安排，可以离开。如果说是大家对Amanda 的课程有很多的疑问，我也看到不管是 private 也好，或者是其他的私信我的人也好，大家都有很多的问题，那么大家可以直接在这里提问。You can unmute yourself, or you can give me your question, or you can put your question on the chat. That's okay. Amanda, 要不你介绍一下你的课程好吗？Could you please introduce your courses?
So it's offered under pen to paper education. So this is the college essay intro class. There's in the registration form, there's a more detailed document if you want to look into the specific lesson plans that I have. And so this is just to basically learn the basics. I have 4 years of admissions counseling. I've gotten kids into pretty good schools. And I have a much different style than a lot of college essay editors do. I will say I clash with a lot of them, but find the tutor that works the best for you. This is just a general course that I offer for like basics of, it's basic creative writing. It's also basic essay writing. That's just my bio. And so I'm offering it on Sunday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific time. So this is for California. For Eastern time, this would be 12 to 2 p.m. For Central time, it would be 11 to 1 p.m. Getting better at time zones. But this is my tried and true. This is where I started. I know this stuff. I've taught this class for many years. Yeah. So that's this course. My next course, I think it's on the next slide. If we could switch to it. So this is my friend Vicky. She is one of my closest friends at Dartmouth. She's a year younger than me. She's an econ major. She's written two young adult books. So we've connected. We've met in creative writing class. I ended up taking creative writing classes in college to try to teach students better. Because I learned better from example. So if a professor did something right, I'd just copy the professor. And so we met in creative writing class. She's a learning fellow in the econ department, where she helps a lot of students with academic papers, which is why I think she's a great fit for this type of class, because again, she's great at evaluating the audience. She also has a creative writing background. She's a writing tutor for personal statements and college application essays for students in Brazil. She's an international student. And she volunteers at a Brazilian nonprofit teaching advanced English, persuasive writing, and speech writing to students in low-income neighborhoods. And she's currently working on her second novel. So she's a really accomplished writer. She's one of my closest friends. She's brilliant. She stuck with the econ major. So she might be smarter than I am. But this is a course where we can learn how to argue, and again, it's my curriculum, so it's based on my debate experience, but all my teachers bring in something new. And that's Saturday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific time with the same time zone translations.
So that's okay. 大家也其实我知道有一个家长跟我说，他的那个英文没有特别的好，但是没关系，大家可以听到刚才Amanda 说中文也是非常棒的，大家也可以用中文提问。如果说大家有问题的话，可以直接开麦，然后咱们来回答问题都可以。
如果你想要我说中文，我可以说中文，就是我英文说的更容易一些。所以如果你听不懂我说的英文，你可以问问题，用中文，然后我可以试着用中文回答。
嗨，Amanda，你好。
你好。
哎，我想请问一个问题，就是说，像我女儿也很喜欢写诗歌，然后她从8年级开始写，然后她每年大概都是一金四银这种状况，然后今年她10年级，她认为她的诗歌写得更成熟更好，因为已经比赛3年了，但我不知道为什么她每次，她大概每一年都会有一篇是 Gold Key，但进了 National 却没有得奖，所以你觉得进了 National 会得奖跟不会得奖，要怎么样才会更提高得奖的机会？因为像这种诗歌，它是属于艺术，每个 judge 看的角度或喜欢或不喜欢，对，但是因为你有2次进了 National 的经验，你觉得假如以诗歌这部分要怎么样提高进了 National 而且会得奖的机会？谢谢。
这个问题挺好的。所以如果像我这个想法，就是因为像你说的，每个 judge 想要的东西不一样，而且你不知道，而且特别是 Scholastic 好像他们要的这个他们的 standards for poetry 特别高，因为他们收日的 submissions 更多的是从诗歌那里来的，因为诗歌别人认为是最容易的。我觉得其实诗歌是写作一方面最难写的。所以我认为的话，就是我发现 Scholastic Arts and Writing 特别喜欢就是更多这些 social problems，比如说 racism、sexism 什么这个 personal experience，用那个在哲学里面我们说use the I to talk about the political，the political is an I。所以这方面，我觉得这个可以看起来你的 subject。不过我觉得最重要的是，我认为就是我跟那个 creative writing student 教他们的时候，就是要让他们更 open-minded。你如果一直想这个 competition 要我写什么，那你写的可能不比你平常想象的好。所以我觉得我开始赢了个 gold，因为我像你女儿一样，一直拿 gold key，一直拿 gold key，每年 honorable mention，每年就是很多 regional，可是一直没有到那个 national level。 我认为就是我就是 I took sophomore year 我没有 submit 什么东西，什么东西都没发。我是那一年就是开始 focus 在 debate 上面，我就是一直没有想这个 writing 怎么赢这个 writing。我那时候在大三的时候，不是高三的时候回去写，那一年我就赢了我第一个 gold medal。因为I returned back to myself and I returned back to the story that I wanted to tell。就是我没有想这个 judge 会要什么，how do I write the best? I wasn't even reading other scholastic arts and writing people, because 我认为我自己写的好。我觉得如果我认为我自己写的好，那总有一天人家也会觉得我写的好。不过如果你女儿真的是在这个stuck point，你可以就是给我发 email，我可以跟她继续聊一下，因为这个问题就是这个是很难很难帮助的这个，因为 I was stuck at that point too，but I think it might be more of a mindset thing than you would think. Because that's the point that I got stuck at, and actually I made it to the NCET writing awards. That's so Scholastic Arts and Writing has poems like the normal poems, and then if you write an exceptionally good poem, you get to go to the National Students Poets Program, and I was a National Students Poets Program semi-finalist, and that was off of my gold medal Sunflower Seeds. So if your daughter is specifically interested in poetry, we can talk. I suspect she might not be reading as much poetry as she is writing. So if we were to work together, I would suggest reading a lot more poetry, and I'll be sending her. I read a ton of poetry, so I'll be sending her a lot. So email me directly about that, because that's definitely a conversation that is just particular to the individual. Because if you send me her writing, I can look at it and I can tell you exactly what I think the judges thought. Because I have experience coaching people.
有一位家长私信我，是问价格，然后他是问就是说这个课程的价格有不一样吗？然后是说报名减免的50元是在今天有效还是一直有效？
所以这两门课不同价格，我在 Zoom 里面发了这个 registration link，我一会儿再会在 WeChat 群里再发一下。所以这里我这个第一门课，因为是 college application，这个比较难教，所以更贵一些。我这个 college 的 essay 是80块，然后我这个critical reading persuasive writing 600，不是80，是800和600，对不起，说错了。所以这个因为一个是 market 是 middle schoolers，另一个 market 是这个 college application。college application 这个 process 比较难教。而且这个50我可能会这个 discount 我可能会给估计2个星期大概。如果有我干其他的活动，可能会再有一次机会有 discount。不过这个免50可能就是2个星期之内。如果有改变的话，我会在微信里面通知。
OK，有一位家长私信了我，为什么要私信我？OK，that's okay. My kid is not confident on her writing as she compared herself with the best writer in her class. We encourage her a lot, but she still thinks she is not a good writer. How can we encourage her to be more confident in her writing and write more?
That's really tough. I would say, okay, so there's two routes you can take it. The first route is if you just tell her not to care about it, she's not going to believe you. I promise you that. As someone who was really insecure and still is sometimes, I'm working on it. It's I think I read a really good, this is going back to the dry craft essays that I read. I read a really good essay about self-consciousness, and it talks about how writers always reach a point where they start reading a bunch of other people's writing and then they start being really insecure about their writing, and then they just don't think they can write and they get too self-conscious. What I tell all of my students is, when you write, there's two minds you need to have. There is the drafting mind and then there's the editing mind. The drafting mind, you are not self-conscious. You are God. Everything you write is golden. Write unrestrained. Put it on the page. I call it dumping. If you're my student, you should be familiar with it. And that this, you need to just be arrogant. You need to be like, every word I write is golden, because that will stop you from holding back as much. I went through a period in college when I got to a point in my poetry where I just kind of stagnated, because I was reading a ton of really good poetry and I was like, God, I suck. If you go and read Ocean Vuong, that man is a genius. And for the longest time, I was like, I need to write like Ocean Vuong. But I'm not Ocean Vuong. I can never write like Ocean Vuong. Ocean Vuong can never write like me, because he's not me. And once I got that realization down, then I started writing without being afraid. Now, obviously, editing brain, everything you write is shit. Edit it, cut it out, change it, destroy your babies. I do an exercise with my students who get too attached to their first drafts. That's like the flip side of the insecure problem. When I used to work in person with them, I would have them print out their paper. I would take the paper and I would shred it up in front of them. It was kind of harsh. And I was like, are you calling the police? And they were like, no. And my response is, good. Because if this was your real baby and I ripped the baby apart in front of you, you would be calling the police. Your writing is not your baby. So there's two minds that I tell my students to have. This is part of the writing process. When you are drafting, everything you write is golden. It is beautiful. When you're editing, then we start getting into it. So I think it might be helpful. You can obviously email me and I could talk to your student about it, because it's more, again, it's a lot of writing is mental. It's a lot of just getting over the self-consciousness. It took me a while to do it too. And so with students like that, oftentimes I'll have them do that writing exercise where basically you have 20 minutes, look at this picture, listen to this music, write. Don't ever stop writing. If I ever hear you stop writing, then I will yell at you. And so that's just to try to get them out of that. So I do have specific exercises. This is a common problem that I run into. I would keep giving her compliments, keep uplifting her, let her speak about her insecurities, but also maybe encourage her just not to read that girl's writing anymore. Because if you're too much focused on other people, you're neglecting your own ability and your own story, because no one can tell a story like you can tell yours. That's my opinion.
Yes, so be yourself. 另外一条私信，其实大家也可以放到那个 chat 里头，然后我先念一下这条私信啊。Could you please introduce some writing contest for us?
Yeah, so there's a lot of really good ones. I would say Scholastic Arts and Writing, I would definitely submit there. They have the most amount of prize money. They have the most amount of recognition. If you get a gold medal, if you get national, you go to New York and you get your prize in the Carnegie Hall. And at the time, Ansel Elgort, random person, spoke at our award ceremony, and I was like, he's an actor. Why is he here? But he was there. So and they have all different categories. They even have it for art and sculpture and painting. There's a good persuasive writing, there's science fiction. I've submitted to all the categories at this point. Did better in some than others. I'm not a good playwright, for example. I learned that the hard way. So I think Scholastic's the best place to start. It takes the most amount of writing from the most amount of age ranges. There's also NCET Writing Awards. That's mostly junior and senior year. Also, if you look up good essay competitions that's the ones that have the scholarships and the large amount of money attached to it. I can't remember them off the top of my head because I didn't do them when I was in high school. They're kind of the things that I recommend to my students. But if you look up essay writing competitions, some of them are going to be persuasive writing competitions. Some of them will be more memoir writing essay competitions. I do also offer, not this summer, but I will be offering Creative Writing 001, which is my intro to creative and competition writing. And I have a full list there. You can also email me if you want the fuller list. I just can't remember it off the top of my head. It's been a while since I taught that class.
Yeah. 我个人有一个建议是，大家其实可以去看看自己学校的官网，每一年的喜报会有你们学校的学长们他们参加了哪些竞赛，拿了什么 讲，然后你可以比照着来做。当然还有一些比较著名的，比如说 New York Times 啊，比如说乔治洛克呀，大家可能都知道。然后很多的大学也会举办一些这种征文比赛。OK，next question is 一个中文问题。Amanda，我就不给你翻译了啊。现在网上有 AI essay writer，Amanda 如何看？Amanda 除了 college essay，还有机会教其他类型的写作课吗？业余时间你喜欢写哪些类型的题材？在哪里可以看到你写的？
所以我现在我觉得关于这个 AI writer，你这个如果你说的是 college essay 的话，AI writer 写的不好。Because the thing is, AI writers don't know you. That's the difference between me and a lot of editors is I get to know you for you, and that's how I help. By like November, I like get to know the person so well that I can kind of, when I start editing their work, I sound like them. And we have a weird moment where I'm like, I sound like you. That's weird. Um, and so AI editors can't get in your head. They don't know which memory matters the most. They don't know which memory will form the best story. So unless Google does something or like AI gets super invasive, unless they get super invasive and it can go into your memories and pick out the best. I don't I don't know how it's going to compare to learning actually how to write. And I think writing is a really important skill because you will be applying to things for the rest of your life. I had to apply to my study abroad program. I had to apply to be in clubs. Once you get in, there's more applications. Which is why I think it's really important to teach this skill to students, especially students who aren't familiar with it. And so other than college essays, so I've taught, right now I'm just offering these 2 courses to kind of see how things go. It's been a while since I've offered classes. But other than that, I've offered literary essay analysis, that's writing 002. I've offered basic creative writing, creative competition writing, like I've mentioned before. I offer an intro class and as well as more advanced classes for people who are actually really interested. It just depends on the interest of the people. I also offer again, for my younger students, fundamentals like grammar structure, sentence structure, basic reading comprehension skills. I tend to like to stay away from test prep because it's hard to teach in a group setting the way that I approach test prep. I just don't want to go the way that a lot of companies have gone, which is teaching it through a gaming style. But yeah, I'm currently also working on an Asian American course on Asian American history, Asian American poetry, Asian American writing. But that's not going to be available until the next year. But I think if these courses go relatively well, I'm definitely open to opening up some of my other classes that were very successful too. And then number 3,
喜欢写哪种类型的题材？
Yeah, so我喜欢写诗，我喜欢写 I like a lot of short stories. I'm currently working on a novel right now. Although I like more literary writing, which is more like the stuff that most people don't read because it's too heavy. Because I like writing pretty. And so my friend, on the other hand, does a lot more genre writing. She writes a lot of young adult fantasy novels. So that's more similar to Divergent, the stuff that actually makes money. That's what she does. I don't like doing that because I think there's something lost when we write more genre writing. Just the writing loses its like color and its prettiness. I like lyrical writing. I've been told my prose is more like poetry than it is prose. But I like writing short stories, flash fiction, poems. I've written plays before. I'm not a good playwright again. But I'm currently working on a novel. And I've also done speculative fiction. So I wrote a nonfiction essay based on my dad's experience in the village and using that to open into more like nonfiction writing on like the history of the Chinese Communist Party and its effect on China. So wide variety. So if your student is interested in something, chances is I've tried it.
下面的一个问题是，关于教学的，说咱们这个班的班级规模有多少人？有多少人？
Yeah, so I think we capped it at 20.
Yeah.
I think we capped it at 20 because I like to keep it smaller, especially in the college essay course. If we're going to have more exercises, I like to actually get to know my students. Getting them to turn on their camera can be quite the challenge. But I like to interact with them more. I like to actually try to get them to write and give them critiques on their writing, because you don't get better at writing by just listening to me talk about writing. Otherwise, everyone would be a great writer. Writing, you learn by reading and by just doing it a ton. So I cap at 20. If it gets really full, I think I can potentially open up another class. But I think right now, we're capping it at 20 just to ensure the quality for each student.
Sure. 下面一个问题是 Amanda 认为自己最擅长写什么？刚才其实已经回答过了，你要再回答一下吗？认为自己最擅长写什么类型？诗歌、小说还是剧本？我只记得 you don't want to try drama, drama play or what?
I honestly, it just depends on what I'm reading. So if I'm reading a lot of poems, I tend to be inspired to write a bunch of poems. Also, for some reason, when I go and look at an art museum, I'm really inspired to write. I don't know how that correlates, but I always tend to write more poems when I go to an art museum. If I go to a history museum, I end up writing more nonfiction. If I like go to the library and I just sit there, I tend to write more short stories. The novel that I'm working on is based on Chinese history, so it's loosely based. So I'm doing a lot of research for that. So there's a lot going on, but I have one big project, which is my novel that I'm writing. And then if I'm just tired, like, so Picasso basically, when he was working on his like big pieces, had these little canvases where he just drew pigeons. He has like an entire series of just pigeons. That's kind of the way I see it. I have my big work, and then I have little small things that I do for fun, because it gets tiring to work on something really heavy. So I don't know if that really answers it, but I kind of do a mix of both. But currently, I think my main project is that novel that I'm working on.
OK，下一个问题是，说可能应该是说 Amanda 以后想在达特茅斯主修什么系呢 ？Your future？
在达特茅斯
Dartmouth。I'm not sure. Perhaps，可能他是想问，就是说你接下来想在达特茅斯毕业之后，想继续修习什么样的系？Just like still the philosophy or what？
我准备去法学院，我要当律师所以我会去学法律这方面，特别是我对那个商业法律，就是我觉得商业法律特别有意思，so like tax law, and a lot of people don't like it. I think it's interesting. So 下次就是我现在在申请法学院，然后进了哪个我就去哪个。Yeah, so business law.
philosophy 转那个法律是非常非常好的，因为都是非常的讲究这种逻辑性的。OK，接下来有一些问题已经回答过了。有一位家长私信我问我 ，Do you teach classic literature？
That's actually something that I was working on. That kind of like goes into my writing 002 class, because I teach how to analyze literature. So that's like how do you look at metaphors? I think the way that school teaches it is very dry. It's very like a simile has like in it. It's more complicated than that. So I do teach a course on that. And I'm thinking like a more advanced course, kind of an offshoot of that analyzing literature course, would be more of like that deep classics. I also have friends that majored in classics at Dartmouth. I can think of one right now who's just like, he's so boring in person, but he lights up when he's talking about like the Iliad. He's a really interesting guy, and so it is in the works. It just depends on what people are more likely, because I can only open a class if there's so many people. If there's only just one person, I can't really open that class. So I've kind of just been offering course based on every time I hold the course, I normally have an end of course survey where the students can put what they want to learn, and that's how I determine what to develop. So I guess to answer your question, yes, kinda writing 002, which will be offered hopefully next term, just depending on how this registration period goes.
接下来的2个问题都是课程的问题，我就接在一起问了。咱们的课是1周几次课？这2门课程分别适合几年级的学生？
一次，每个星期一次。There will be, so every class is 2 hours long. That way we can have 1 hour to do the lecture, another hour to just have exercises and get direct feedback from the teacher. And then there's office hours. Both classes office hours will be me because I created the curriculum and my friend just doesn't have the time. And office hours are by appointment only because I don't want to just sit on the Zoom. I could be doing something else. So if you want office hours, it will be in the syllabus, but you would email me and we would set up a time. So 一次一个星期。然后这2门课是 so the writing class, the 001, the persuasive essay is more for middle schoolers. If a high schooler really needs help, they could join it. But it's targeted towards middle schoolers. And it uses a lot of my debate experience to help teach it. The College 001 course, it's mostly for high schoolers. It's mostly, so all high school can benefit from it. But mostly it's targeted towards juniors and seniors. Seniors, it's a little late because we're headed into the next applications. I already have students who have messaged me for one-on-one application help. So we're already headed into that next cycle. So it might be a little too late, but they're welcome to join. And there's also, sometimes I have middle schoolers who want to do creative writing, more competition writing, and they want to explore personal memoir writing, in which case this is a great course to start with. And I think that answers the question.
Anna, are you there?
Sorry，我的网络好像有一点点问题。Sorry about that. OK，现在的话已经没有问题了。我也知道，就是大家对Amanda 肯定还有一些很细节的问题想问她。那么 don't hesitate to email Amanda. Let's share the Amanda's email again. 哇，稍等一下。好，那么我们今天的活动就暂时到这里，非常的感谢大家在抽出了自己宝贵的时间来参加我们的这次会议。OK，Thank you Amanda，Amanda 已经给了大家这个注册的这个链接，非常的感谢。那么我们今天呢活动就到此为止，时间也比较长了，非常的感谢 Amanda，感谢 Charlie，感谢所有来参加活动的朋友。那么我们今天就暂时到这里，谢谢大家。
好，谢谢安娜，谢谢 Amanda，谢谢各位家长参与。好，大家晚安。
OK，我们倒数5个数之后就暂时结束了。5、4、3、2、1，谢谢大家，再见。